Over the last couple of videos that you might have seen on my channel, I've been discussing what is the business operating system and giving you kind of some ideas about how I think about this concept. And in this video, I want to describe what are the 15 components of your future business operating system so that you can better understand of how to apply this in your business and how this actually looks as the end result. So it's not just, like a subtle concept that you can imagine in your head, but it's also something that you can apply and build inside your business. So 15 components of your future business operating system. Let's start. The operating system is, and what I mentioned in the previous videos, is basically like a puzzle, but instead of puzzle pieces, you're putting together your business processes, right? So imagine solving a puzzle. You would have your final picture in front of you, and you would just take one puzzle at a time and put it together, right? And put it in the right place, in the right spot. And this way, you're putting that final puzzle together, final picture. The same happens with the business operating system. Here, instead of the puzzle pieces, we're just using business processes or workflows, however you want to call them. The way I understand business process or workflow is just basically something that has a beginning, the end, and all the steps described in between. So imagine your service delivery of how you deliver services to the clients. Imagine your purchase ordering process. Imagine your accounts payable, accounts receivable, your hiring process. So again, all those are different components and puzzle pieces inside your business operating system. And the goal of today's video, I want to give you a list, actually a full list of many processes and many business components that's going to be part of your business operating system. So similarly to a puzzle, your business operating system has the final picture, right? So this is just an image that I put together here. You can imagine that each one of these puzzles, whenever you're solving the puzzle, you're going to take one puzzle, as I said, and put it in the right spot. The fun part here is that you have full freedom over defining the final picture, and that's the fun part, right? So it's you who define what's that final picture of your business operating system is going to look like, and how is it going to be different from all your competitors, so that you can beat your competition and you can serve more customers and make more money at the end of the day. So today I will share what are the most common components or puzzle pieces, right, as we discussed in comparison to the puzzle of your business operating system, so you can find it easier and apply this concept in your business. My purpose of this video is not only to share the theory with you, I actually want to give you like a practical advice of what I found over the last 7 years working with companies. So whatever I'm sharing here is just my experience from working with different businesses. So first, what I want to do is I want to start with big sections of your business operating system. Because if you think about the puzzle, let me go back here. When you're solving a puzzle, most of the time what you do, you start from the top left or top right corner, or bottom left, bottom right corner, but you're basically visually breaking down that puzzle into different components, right? So that it's easier for you to put it together. The same way, the same approach we're going to use for the business operating system. And I put together like this example, right? And again, we're going to go through each one of these components one by one. Basically, the main 5 big sections of the puzzle that we want to focus on are the revenue operations, which basically is everything related to how you produce revenue, right? It relates to your sales process. It relates to your service delivery or product delivery, whatever that is, or product support, service support, customer support. That is all revenue operations, basically what brings revenue into your company. The next part is finance and accounting, right? This is the part which is extremely important for your reporting, for making sure your cash flow is doing all right, and for all the different financial metrics in your business, right? We also have the people operations, which is again basically everything about hiring and managing people and human resources inside your company. We have our marketing operations, which again relates, you can say that it's very similar to what we discussed as the sales and revenue operations, but this one is more about, again, marketing is not always the same as sales, even though sometimes people use and call it the same name. But this relates more to managing your campaigns, doing some, direct mail marketing and all that stuff. Which you could technically actually combine with the revenue operation. So there is nothing wrong with this. What I'm showing you is just an example, and maybe it's one of the first versions of how I break this down. So this will definitely evolve over time. And for your business, it might look slightly different. So you have full freedom of, tweaking this and renaming this and making sense out of this concept. Again, my idea is just to give you the like the understanding, the beginning of this concept, and then you can evolve this concept inside your company. And then the other part is the operational processes, which is basically everything that's related to maintaining the business, to make sure the business keeps running, for like purchasing processes, maintenance requests, all those things that are not necessarily related to the customer jobs, to finance department, to your people processes, but need to happen in order for a business to run. Now, let's go through them one by one. I'm not going to take maybe a lot of time just to go through every single process, but I just want to give you an idea, an example of what that business operating system final picture could look like for your business. I'm going to change the color here to, let me do something like this. So as the part of the revenue operations over here, the processes that we have here is the lead intake process. So again, it's basically how leads are coming into your system. You're probably going to be using some sort of a web form or online form on your website. Maybe you're running Facebook ads, maybe they're filling out forms somewhere else. That information is going to flow into your CRM system. And basically that lead intake process describes how that data flows from online form into your CRM system, what happens in your CRM system when you follow up with people, schedule the appointments, and all of that. You have your sales process is after the lead is inside your system. Now, what do you do? How do you actually sell them? Like, do you have some email sequences? Do you need to do a webinar? So maybe you have an in-person invitation or meeting with the person, right? And again, these things might be put together. So you can have like sales process together with intake process. The point here is just to give you an example of like what are the possibilities of processes that you can include under the revenue operations section of our puzzle. You also have the proposal and quote process, the contract approval and signature process, client onboarding, for example, and delivery process. You have customer change request process and client offboarding. If you see the way I listed them is basically going from the lead coming into your system, right, which is here, and then going through step by step of like what is happening with that customer, potential customer. Like, do we provide a service? All right, then we need to provide a support. All right, then we need to offboard the client, whatever that looks like in your business. Maybe you don't need to do this, then it's not part of your business operating system. But the point is, these are all the processes that are part of this first piece of the puzzle. Now, when you go to finance and accounting, examples of the processes here are accounts payable, accounts receivable, purchasing process, your payroll processing, your monthly reconciliation, your budget request process, right? So all of these are examples. Most popular, obviously, are accounts payable process, accounts receivable, purchasing process, if you need to purchase some materials or order some things, payroll processing, right? Monthly reconciliation. Most of the time, maybe not all of you have budget requests, but if you do, again, that's going to be part of your system. But the point, again, one more time, is basically describing your finance and accounting component or part of your business and breaking it down into all the repeatable processes or workflows that need to happen in order for your business to exist and for your business to flourish. So again, these are list of examples that I've seen in the companies and that I've worked with the companies on this processes. But in your example, you might find something else, maybe very specific to your industry. And again, this is the whole idea, is just to make it flexible and specific to your business. Now, people operations. You can think about this like employee hiring process. Like, how do you hire people? Is there a process behind that? Maybe not now, but you might want to list out all the steps so you can, again, if you're doing this right now, you could hire a different person who could complete that process and help you offboard that from your plate. You also have the employee onboarding. It's like you have new employee coming this week. What do we do? Like, how do we onboard them? Do we need to give them, I don't know, new software access? Do we need to add them to our Office 365, whatever needs to happen? There is a process behind this, probably. There is time off request process, employee offboarding process when you're firing someone or someone is leaving the company. So again, all of these things are examples of your people operations. If you have more, you can just simply add them to your business operating system. And if there is something very specific that you do that no one else does, or maybe you do it in a very unique way, that's exactly what differentiates you from the competition. All right. Now, the marketing operations, what I mean by this, which you technically could connect and make it like the same part of the puzzle with the sales. But it's basically your content production, your marketing campaigns, your event webinars production process, right? So these are the things that are generating the demand. And then here, the sales process or the revenue operations is actually what converts the demand and then what provides the service or the product to the customer. Some of the companies have also the print and mail campaign process, right? So how they send their campaigns inside the mail. And then the last thing is operational processes. Here, you're just adding everything else that you can think of. For example, you're purchasing materials. That's going to go into purchasing process. Maintenance request, vendor onboarding, internal IT access request process. Now, as I said, you might want to have, for example, your purchasing process as part of your revenue operations because you're always purchasing things for specific projects. So they always are part of your service delivery process. Now, in this case, they would be part of this piece of the puzzle. But if you want to separate them, they can be separated into operational processes. I don't think it really matters much of how you break it down into different sections. The main point is when you're looking at this business operating system, you can clearly see of what makes you special to the customers and to any stakeholders who are working with you inside your niche or inside your industry. So that's the main idea. Now, this is just, again, this is the concept, right? So now we have this processes written down and we have all this puzzles of the business operating system. And then the question is, what's next? The next thing is actually we start building our business operating system piece by piece. We know what the final image or final picture is going to look like. This is the final picture over here. And again, this could be different for your business than from any other business out there. And that's exactly what we need. And now we need to start actually putting that puzzle together. So we start by building the business operating system one process at a time. If you remember, I mentioned this to you earlier. I said, when you're putting together or solving a puzzle, you're focusing on one puzzle piece at a time. Exactly same works with the process. You're going to take one process from this list, and you might not want to list all possible processes in your business. You can have literally 3 to 4 or 2 to 3 processes for each of these sections. And then just select one. Let's say first, we're going to be focusing on lead intake process because this is the one that we're struggling with the most right now at this point of time. All right, then this is going to be number one priority. We're going to take this puzzle piece. For now, forget about anything else and get back to working on that puzzle piece. Now, this is an example that I put together, and this is most of the time what I do with my clients as I'm building these processes and I'm building these systems for different companies. What I'm trying to do is first understand what are all the steps inside the process. What are we talking about? How do we do work right now? This is, if I zoom in over here, you can see an example of the employee hiring and onboarding process. And this is how I do this. I basically create a diagram. This is a swim lane diagram. So if you want to be fancy, you can create it on a piece of paper on a whiteboard. I usually suggest using tools in this example, I'm using Miro. You can use Lucidchart. There are many other tools out there for this kind of stuff. But you basically list out step by step. This is what we do first. This is what we do second. This is what we do third, fourth. And here on the left-hand side, you're mentioning what are the people who are responsible for these tasks. When you're listing it this way, it's easy to understand what things can be automated, where maybe things need to change responsibility. So maybe one person needs to take another person's task, or maybe we need to change a sequence or the order of the task of how it's done in the process. But when you're listing this process, it gives you, first of all, documentation of how do we do work right now. And second of all, it gives you a better understanding of what that system or part of the system or your business operating system is going to look like. Because now you start to align, if you remember, if I go back here, you start aligning the 3 components, which I don't think I actually mentioned here, but there are 3 components of the business operating system. The first one is going to be your technology. I'm going to put it here, right? The second one is going to be your, so it's going to be your processes. And the third one is going to be your people. All right, so when you align these 3 components together, this is basically the whole idea of putting that puzzle piece into its spot, right? So this is aligning these 3 components. The way you do them is first understanding your process, because this is what differentiates the most, right? And this is where we have the steps listed. The second one is now you start understanding what is the technology that we're using as part of this system. And this is what I do here. Now, this is a very, this is an example of the hiring and onboarding process. So in this example, people are using hiring and employee onboarding software here. They're using the Calendly for meeting scheduling. Record management system is built in Replit, which is one of the you can build like custom applications there. And there is also Viventium, which is payroll and HR software. So again, these things are basically what softwares and technologies the company is using to complete that process. Because you're probably using a bunch of software to do something in your business, and you just need to mention that when you're building and designing that system in place. Now, as you understand all the technologies and you understand the process, which is the second thing, now we need to put together, what I like to do is I like to call them system architecture. This is where I basically put together the technology that we use or the softwares that we use, the processes of how we use them, and then for people to understand how do they interact with the system. And this is where the system architecture comes into place. It's basically describing step by step of like, all right, when I start working with this system, like what happens first? I need to create a job post. I need to trigger a job posting in the job post. And then it goes through my record management system, goes into my hiring and employee onboarding system. So again, or software, it goes through different softwares, and there is a way of how this system interacts with the user. And this is what this system architecture is all about. But basically, when we're building this, and again, I'm just giving you an example of how I do this and how I follow this process. You can do this, if you have any other idea of how you'd like to, put together that design of the system in place for your, let's say, hiring and onboarding process, you can easily do that. But I feel like starting with process, then going and moving into understanding what technologies and softwares we use, and then finishing with how people interact with that future system that we're going to build is the easiest way. The point is we start with one process at a time, and then when we finish with that, we roll out that system. For example, we're using ClickUp, we're using Zapier for managing automations, and then we're using a different software for managing a third piece inside our process, right? We need to integrate them together, build them in a way that's easy for people to use and understand, and again, also explain to people through these diagrams, and also demoing the system to them and doing training together with them of like how this system is going to change their day-to-day work, because user adoption is important. Most of the time it goes sideways. So whenever you're communicating it very clearly, showing them how the system works, makes it very, very easy. Now in this example, I'm not showing you an actual example of the system in ClickUp or like in any other software. I have those videos in my YouTube channel if you want to check them in more detail and see how that actually looks from inside. But here I'm just explaining the concept first. So now imagine when you are taking one process at a time and you go process by process by process by process. When you have dozens of your processes designed intentionally and documented this way, it could look something like this. All right. This is just an example, and you might not see this very well just because of how I blurred some of this things here. But again, this is just an actual real example of the project that I worked on and I'm working on right now. And you can see over here that there is a bunch of different processes that we mapped out this way, and that we designed different components of the systems this way. So again, I'm not saying that all 15 components are here, and there is still a lot of work to do for us here. But the point is that we start one process at a time, and when you go through 5 processes, 6 processes, this is basically the list, the documentation of how your company is different from your competition, and how you intentionally design these systems around the technology you use, the processes that you execute, and the people that you have as part of your team. So what I wanted to say is that as the last part is that with this level of detail and professionalism, your business is ready for scale and can easily leave all your competition behind, because now you know how you're different. It's easier to communicate to all your stakeholders, and it's easier to execute inside the systems for you and your team. Thanks.